Hey, and welcome to the April forecast. If you're watching live or if you're watching in recording, which is not mean to say that you're not alive. If you're not alive, you should probably check out Adam Bernstein at the Medium channel, where he gives. Well, if you're alive, you should also watch at the Medium channel. I seem to be very blurry and out of focus over here. I apologize for that, but as with many things, there's not a lot I can do about it. Okay, so let's talk quickly about April. Let's talk about April, and want to get into the nuts and bolts of this. The high energy that we had in hey there, Cheryl. The high energy that we had in um, March, especially the end of March, continues throughout April and into May. Remember, of course, high energy simply means there's a lot going on. There's a lot of motion in the cosmos. There's a lot of movement going on. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It could be very good. It's likely to make you, if you cherish the status quo, as most of us do, it's likely to be a little bit unsettling, but being unsettled to a certain extent ought to be okay. Very high energy. We have eclipses. We have an eclipse, not eclipses anymore. We have Jupiter meeting Uranus, which is a big aspect, and all of the things that happen this month. And there's a lot of stuff happening at different levels. Is all happening with Mercury retrograde. Mercury stations to retrograde on Monday, the 1st of April. It should be quite an April Fool's Day. That would be my assessment of the situation. It should be quite an April Fool's Day. And the potential is really sets the tone for the month, and the tone for the month would be one of little bit of confusion. Not only is Mercury retrograde, it's Mercury retrograde in Aries. And Aries is it's a fire sign, and so Mercury in Aries is like that brilliant spark, that bright idea, that type of thing. The problem that you would run into with Mercury in Aries is that it's sort of like you see it and you intuit it, which is great. And if you're wrong, well, it's very hard to know because you're not really getting, you're not doing a lot of processing. You're not bouncing facts around off of others, and so you just see it. It's just there. You've got it 1 2 3, and that's a little bit of a problem sometimes. And so now we put Mercury retrograde in Aries, and that looks to be even more of a challenge. So Mercury is retrograde until the 25th. So from late on the 1st until the 25th, which is a little bit longer than we usually have for Mercury retrograde. Unless I'm getting bad data, which of course is possible. Remember that it's the time around the stations, right? Right around the beginning of April. Let's say if you're watching this earlier, March 30th, 31st, April 1st, April 2nd, and also at the end of the retrograde, right around the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, that you're likely to get the most pungent, pungent. Well, it's, pungent makes sense when we're talking about Aries. The most pungent aspects of Mercury retrograde would come through right around the stations. But of course, the entire time that is retrograde, all of the usual caveats. Don't sign contracts, back up your data. I have my there's an interesting story. Not interesting. Oh, and I've lost it, of course. There we go. Here we are. Backup disk. I've had 2 backup disks fail. I've never really had a computer disk fail, but I've had the backup disks fail twice. I have another one. This is just the one that I can't part with for some unknown reason. Maybe I'll get rid of it during Mercury retrograde. That's a good idea. Hey, Teresa. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, go search on my channel. There's a nice video explaining Mercury retrograde really, really well. And maybe I'll make a playlist for that. That's a good Mercury retrograde thing to do. Make a playlist of things like retrograde videos and stuff. Okay, now let's start the first week of the month. The first week, we're heading towards that eclipse. This is the new moon solar eclipse on April 8th. And that's going to be a big deal, of course. If you're anywhere in the central to eastern United States, you have a good chance of seeing it. You can actually get into the eclipse path if you're someplace around Buffalo or Cleveland. Good luck finding a hotel, man. Like the little, like the Hampton Inn kind of places, that sort of, Holiday Inn Express type of thing that you might expect, someplace out in the suburbs of Buffalo to be paying, maybe $119 a night or something like that. They're going, the hotel rooms out there are going for like $500. But I got a plan. And it will work out well as long as there's no, you know how it is, fog, clouds, and rain, which is very likely in the Great Lakes area at this time of year. We'll see. Anyway, the first week we're heading towards that eclipse, and it's a very, very big week for relationship stuff. And this actually starts at the end of March, coming in like the 29th, the 30th. And that is because Pallas Athene, the truth teller asteroid, recently stationed to go retrograde on Friday, the 29th of March, is going to be squared to Juno, the partnership asteroid. So sort of like the opportunity to say something important is, with regards to relationships, sort of breaking a new message out there, right? This is sort of like the weekend before Mercury goes retrograde. You know how it is. And that's great. We also have in the middle of the week Venus conjunct Neptune, which is just a sweet, nice aspect. That is like if you put on your rose-colored glasses. I personally have these orangey things to watch, so I don't get the blue light too much. Anyway, so it sort of puts things into soft focus. It's a nice relationship kind of thing. It's not ideal if you're looking at like making financial decisions, I have to say. But other than that, you should be very good. The next day, Venus goes into Aries, and then she sextiles Pluto. It's kind of a nice opportunity period for relationships. I talked about this quite a bit on this week's weekly forecast, but it's kind of a nice opportunity period for relationships. Move things along, keep them in soft focus. Venus in Aries, which gets a bad rap from some folks, is actually a pretty nice energy. It's definitely more outgoing. Let's get, sort of springtime kind of energy, which I think is very, very nice, and make the most of that. But we start out with this sort of Venus-Juno aspect, not sort of Venus-Juno, as the Venus-Juno aspects. No sort of about it. It's a square. We know that for damn sure. What's the matter with me? Sort of. Anyway, we start out with this aspect, which is a square. It seems like you're going to say something. And of course, we're doing this in the midst of Mercury about to go retrograde. And then that aspect, because the two planets, the two asteroids, are actually both shifting direction. Pallas Athene recently shifted back, squares Juno. Then Juno stops her retrograde and comes forward. Anyway, they aspect each other twice. The next time is on the 22nd of April. And so stuff that you put out there at the beginning of the month, end of March, beginning of April in relationship may show up again towards the end of the month as Mercury gets ready to go direct on the 22nd of April. And then I'll just put it out there that on the 30th of the month, the end of April for sure, Venus will square stationing Pluto. So again, sort of a easy opening up opportunity period in the beginning of the month, and then probably at the end of the month, from the 22nd down to the end of the month and into May, a little bit more of like things sort out a little bit. Again, if your relationship is in a place where things are going to get better or worse, there's an indication that we're at tipping points, and you can tip things in the direction you want them to go. If if you're not in a relationship, you don't want to be, whatever it is, if things are going fine, it won't really do anything to you. So don't worry about it. But that's probably the way it will play out for folks that are at tipping points. All of this stuff really only works for folks that are at tipping points. If you're looking for making a change, or if you're resisting a change, then you really feel this stuff. Otherwise, it's okay. We have the eclipse then next. Well, I shouldn't say next week. I don't know when you're watching this, but on April 8th, we have the solar eclipse that is at 19 degrees of Aries. And we'll have to wait to see how that manifests itself. I hope I remember to tell you this in a couple of months, but on May 26th, Mars goes over the eclipse degree. And solar eclipses are seeding points, right? They're new moons. They don't manifest right away. The full moon eclipse that happened at the lunar eclipse that happened at the end of March, back on March 25th, that happened. Then things are right in front of you. Boom. You literally, actually, in this case, right in front of you. It's a full moon. Things come to light in the day or so around the eclipse. Solar eclipses less so. Solar eclipses have this kind of, remember this, because you're gonna get a little deja vu in a couple of minutes. Solar eclipses have this sort of implosive intensity about them, sort of draws you inward, pulls you a little bit. It's like the time before the thunderstorm. This is this implosive kind of energy. And then something comes along and triggers it later on. And I'm guessing that it is Mars going over the eclipse degree at the end of May. That's going to do it. Eclipses also mostly play out on the world stage, unless you have something sitting right at, and I mean right at 19 degrees of Aries. Other than that, we all feel like the tension of the eclipse a little bit. We all, like, eclipses tell you what's important, but they blow it all out of proportion. They make everything seem bigger than it otherwise would. A big deal. Everything's a big deal. It probably is important. Probably not that big a deal. I mean, you'll handle it. Even if it is a big deal, you'll handle it. You've gotten this far. You don't think this eclipse is gonna throw you off track, do you? No, nothing to worry about. One thing that is interesting about this eclipse, though, is that it is in incredible, like 4 minutes of arc conjunction with Chiron. It is exactly conjunct Chiron. So Chiron is right there in the midst of this eclipse. And if I was a chiropractor, I would tell you what that all means. It's certainly, if you have your natal Chiron at 19 degrees of Aries, which is possible if you're from like the mid 70s time. If you were born in the mid 70s, well, you're from that time then, right? If you were born in the mid 70s, you possibly have Chiron right at 19 degrees, and you'll have to tell us what it means. So it's an open question. It seems like this might have a lot to do with processing our basic issues around self-worth. I think that might be kind of what Chiron and Aries is about. But you don't need me here to speculate on things I don't really know about. It is conjunct Chiron. So we'll have to see how that goes. Now, interesting thing happens in that second week of April, and that is that Mars conjuncts Saturn in Pisces. That happens on the Wednesday of that month. That would be the 10th of March. And so this really colors the entire week. It lands at midweek, and it really colors the entire week because aspects build, they peak, and then they trail off. When Mars conjuncts Saturn, even at eclipse time, especially when Mercury is retrograde, not a good time to multitask, not a good time to try to do two things at once, right? The Mars, Saturn, focus. Mars and Saturn appreciate focused, direct kind of work. This is, you pick a project, you do it. If you complete it, you go on to the next thing. One thing at a time. Don't multitask when Saturn and Mars get together. You feel the need to do stuff. And of course, Saturn appreciates your motivation. And of course, Saturn goes, well, I'm not going to make it easy for you, but determined action. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. They're in Pisces, and Pisces is a dual sign. We got two fish, right? So this kind of brings up the question of, are we going to be drawn towards multitasking? Are we going to try to do too much? Probably. Mars, Saturn, it infuses us with a certain amount of energy that is best directed towards one thing at a time, serious kind of work. And then we have the eclipse, which is kind of giving us extra energy, even if it is a solar eclipse. And we have Mercury retrograde. It looks like a week. Just do your best to do one thing at a time. It's a lot of energy going around, a lot of energy flying around. Sort of keep your head down and focus on what you got to do. Don't get too distracted. That's kind of the way that you handle that. Again, we're likely to be pulled towards multitasking. We're likely to be pulled in a lot of directions simultaneously, what with the eclipse and everything like that. But approach it with a kind of one step at a time way to do things. Little bit of a what I would kind of call there's a break in the action. There's plenty of stuff going on, but there's a monthly forecast. The next thing that happens, we have a little bit of a lull period. It's the moon is waxing. There's good stuff going on, and on the 19th, the sun goes into Taurus, and we can all just it's Taurus time. We would just enjoy ourselves, generally speaking. And we have between the 19th, when the sun goes into Taurus, and the 23rd, which is the full moon in Scorpio, we've got lots and lots and lots of stuff happening. Now, that full moon in Scorpio, it happens at 4 degrees Scorpio, is usually kind of rough, right? The moon, being made of cream cheese, does not really appreciate the cutting, scorpionic vibe that much. And on top of all, the moon does not really like to be full. Modesty is more the lunar way. And so, we get the full moon lunacy with the extra added scorpionic intensity. The May full moon is, generally speaking, it's a bit of a rough spot. In the northern hemisphere, by the way, if you're in the northern hemisphere, the moon is barely getting up in the sky. The moon does not make that big arc, like, say, for example, if you were around the solstice, the moon was way high in the sky, and you could read by it at night. In the northern hemisphere, it's going to be very low in the sky. It doesn't make much of an appearance. It's not a very bright full moon. It sort of goes with the overall vibe of the thing, I think. Then we also have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Jupiter and Uranus get together every 14 years. And this time they're doing it in the sign of Taurus. This is kind of the aspect of the year. When you're looking at planetary aspects, this is the aspect of the year, I think. What do we associate with Jupiter-Uranus? We associate technological innovation and change. That is usually a big part of it. The use of technology, the way that it gets done, also very, very strong for like social causes and so on. Jupiter tends to, Jupiter is the sort of beneficent, and Uranus is, the Aquarius, it's the sign of the people and so on. So we often get a lot of progressive social causes, although don't mistake it, it is also considered to be the big capitalist aspect. Jupiter and Uranus they kind of get together to form a very capitalist kind of vibe. Jupiter expansion, doing the best, faith in everything. And Uranus, it is the sign of the people. Aquarius is the sign of the people. Uranus has a strong individuality thing going on, though. So there's like, each individual does their thing. It's in the sign of Taurus, which has a lot to do with monetary stuff and resources. Be very, very interested to see what happens right around the third week in April in terms of cryptocurrency. It'd be really interesting to see what other innovations come on that might have to do with either food supply and or banking changes and stuff like that. That's a big topic, but it should be, that's a time to watch. Not long afterwards, we have Jupiter, we have the sun squaring Pluto. That's a power struggle thing. Who's in charge here? The sun is in Taurus, Pluto is in Aquarius. The sun in Taurus is a little bit like, well, look at the nice stuff I have. And Pluto in Aquarius is sort of holding the space for the common person, and it's sort of that there's that who's really got the power, I always say that with Pluto and the sun, it's like, the sun is the royalty, it's the king, it's the queen, and they get all of the honors and all of the, you think everything's in charge. Pluto is the banker that has to finance the sun, and so you get this interesting dynamic. It should be really, really interesting week in the collective. And as I always remind you, you live in the collective. That's your neighborhood. This is not something that's happening to other people. This is happening to you. It's just happening to all of us. It'd be a really interesting week for that. Okay, we have this thing as we end the month. Mars will meet with Neptune. That is a kind of that's the kind of aspect. Mars meets with Neptune in Pisces. That's kind of letting it all go. This is there's high energy, and that is then followed by dissipation of energy. Mars Neptune does that. It's lots of energy and then it dissipates, or it's dissipating energy to begin with, or it's going well beyond the boundaries. It is just, and in Pisces, Mars Neptune always does that, and in Pisces you get the extra effect. So it's very, very strong. It's one of those be careful driving kinds of things, especially since it's happening the day after Mercury goes direct. So we're in the midst of Mercury retrograde confusion as Mars meets with Neptune. So, I'm not a big cautionary watch out for anything kind of astrology, but I think when it comes to driving and when it comes to some stuff, we want to be a little bit cautious with that. I wanted to say about the full moon too. The full moon is officially the end of eclipse season, right? On the 23rd, we're 2 weeks past the last eclipse. That's usually when we're down at baseline. And it just happens to be the Scorpio full moon, which is probably the most intense full moon of the year. So it's sort of like a little, pat on the back out on your way out the door type of thing. As we get to the very end of the month, the very last day of the month, the 30th, we have Mars going into Aries, much more direct expression of energy, and Venus, now in Taurus, will make a square to Pluto. Again, this is the kind of like, what started at the beginning of the month comes back up now at the end of the month, either the 22nd, when Pallas, Athena, and Juno squared off for the second time, or at the end of the month with Venus square to Pluto. And Pluto is stationing to retrograde on May 1st. So this is Venus and Pluto really kind of tangling it up there. Pluto is very, very strong because he's stationing. We're all feeling that Pluto energy. And what is the Pluto station energy that we'll feel the 29th and the 30th and then May 1st and 2nd? It is an intense, implosive, calm before the storm, waiting for things to pop kind of energy. Very, very much like the solar eclipse, at least the way I describe it, very much like the solar eclipse. Very intense month, lots of stuff going on. Use it to your benefit. Use it to your benefit. Push things in the direction you want them to go, especially relationship stuff at the beginning of the month. And then really throughout the month, you have lots of good opportunities. Stay focused, especially on that second week of the month, and see what happens on the third week of the month, and the last week of the month. But be aware that there's a lot of energy to do stuff. All right, let me see what the comments are over here. From Teresa, good morning. Want to go up Whiteface Mountain, maybe be above the clouds. Whiteface Mountain will be above the clouds, but it won't be in the direct eclipse path. Chiropractor. My natal Mars is there, listening carefully. Has the eclipse at exactly her moon in Aries. Well, she may, find a new place to live or something like that would be great. Yes, we should always, if you have an elderly relative, you should go visit them. Of course, she has a moon in Aries. She should come visit you, really, because Aries likes to get out and do stuff. It is. Yeah, I mean, I think the moon is made of cream cheese. Maybe it is Emmentaler or something like that. Yeah, it could be made out of blue cheese for that matter. Jupiter in my 10th house square. So the thing with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is the house position is probably the best way to read that in terms of what's happening to any of us individually. Look to the house that it's in, and if it's in your 10th house, this technological innovation, new beginnings type of thing in the 10th house would probably fall out into the area of career for you. It depends where in your chart it falls by house position. That would be kind of the thing that I would look at mostly. So you're having this sort of new beginning, and maybe some big surprises, new things streaming into you from the house. That it may very well be where like some new thing that is out there in the collective that we're all dealing with and stuff like that actually comes into your life. And if you happen to work in a technical field or something like that, and it's in your 10th house, well then. Also, too, I think we will get like some knowledge about what's going on right away on that day. I mean, the configuration is such that you should look and see what's happening as at least a clue to what's going on. But it's another one of those things that may very well take a long time to manifest. Or alternatively, it's very possible that you have already started to become somewhat aware of what this thing is going to be for you. Something new that is coming up in the area of life, in the house, my house position. It's very possible that you already are aware of it, and it's going to sort of accelerate past that point. The last time they got together was in Pisces in 2010. This is a 14-year cycle between Jupiter and Uranus. Last time they got together was Pisces in 2010. And I think one of the biggest innovations that happened at that time was that movements like the Arab Spring and the Occupy movement, they were organized by technology. They were organized by things like Twitter. That was the way they were doing things. It was this new, and it's very Piscean too, sort of nebulous crowd thing that's happening, right? You're not really sure what it is, and then all of a sudden it appears, and then it goes away, and nobody knows what's going on because if you're not dialed into it, but it's all being done through technology and social media. The prior one back in 1997, early 1997, was in the sign of Aquarius. It was, ostensibly, it was the explosion of the internet and the eventual. I think you could probably make a big case that the 2010 one was sort of peak social media. Well, it's peak more something like that. Don't let me say that, because I would regret that upon reflection. But I think the 1997 one was sort of the beginning of that. Was the time when everybody got online, your dial-up service and all of that. Became sort of like the way began. The way that we do things is online. So that would give you a clue. By the way, the one that happens in Aquarius, the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Aquarius, uh, was a very, very big push for astrology and all kinds of other new agey sorts of things. In large part, I think, because Pluto had gone into Sagittarius, and it was about it was part of that was expansion of looking into new things. Sagittarius, very much about exploring different belief systems. So Pluto in Aquarius sort of furthered that. Of course, Pluto in Sagittarius furthered that. Although Pluto in Sagittarius also furthered the other side of the equation, which was fundamentalism. Okay, constantly worried about my house going up foreclosure. My ex-husband is constantly, yeah, Pisces moon. Yes, well, Pisces moon. It's yeah, you know, if it is somewhat anxiety prone moon. You feel a lot. You feel a lot with that Pisces moon. It's very sensitive. It takes in a lot. You've got your own strong sensitivities, and it's just an inherently empathic placement. And I would say, like, a lot of psychic protection, a lot of really working on yourself and maintaining boundaries and things like that in a very conscious way. Adam Bernstein over in the Medium channel will be a very good resource for you. Actually, has me focused on home cleanouts. Yeah, 19 area, and but with Chiron being there too, you could really do a Chiron cleanse. Well, those are some ideas for April. Watch the weekly. You should subscribe and watch the weekly forecasts and pick up on things. This has been information packed monthly forecast. Usually I feel we get 15-20 minutes of forecast and then the rest of it. But this is the kind of astrological weather that you're going to want to unpack on a week by week basis. So subscribe. That's good. And we'll be seeing you, at some point in time. Have good ones.